Hello and welcome to the Wise Yourself Up podcast. I am your host, Carla, and I am absolutely delighted that you're here. In today's episode, I'm going to share around grief. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, thank you so much. And I would love you to leave a review if you're enjoying it, just so other people can decide whether this podcast would be any good to listen to or not. And if you think the podcast is a bit crap, then email me, DM me, and give me your feedback. I love to hear from you all. Hello, how are you? I am recording on a Monday morning. It just seemed like winter. Well, not winter, I'm being dramatic. Autumn hit like a big wave, didn't it? It got so dark already. By 8 or 9, it's pitch black. And the weather has taken a change in London for definite. What's been my crack? The wave effect started, which is gorgeous. We are on day 3 of connecting together in the land of Zoom and practicing breath work, practicing attending to our internal worlds. And it's been gorgeous so far. I love these courses, these immersions, and everything I learn for women. I actually have begun my course for Gabor Maté too. It takes full swing from next week. It's all induction and trying to know where everything is and all that sort of crack. So I actually need to plan out my month, get that sorted. I'm so excited. I'm nervous about the amount of studying and having that. Because you ever get when you're doing a course, you just never have any peace. You know, you always feel guilty, like you should be reading more and, working more on your coursework and doing this and doing that. And also when you're studying and you're working full time and you're working for yourself, it can feel like a lot. But I'm delighted to be doing the course and I know that I will just get so much out of it. And I'm sure it won't feel like work because I do love the work that I do. I do love studying trauma and breath work and movement and all the mystery and magic workings of our bodies. Linked into my crack and the theme of this week of grief. And just to note, I mean grief in terms of grieving someone who's died, not grieving exes. Grieving exes is a very different process for me than grieving dead people. So the advice that I'm sharing today and my thoughts and feelings on it all and what you've shared with me is totally around people being deceased, not exes, because that's a whole different way that we need to grieve, I feel. It was my dad's anniversary on Friday, the 6th of September. From memory, he died around 5:45. It was around those sunrise hours, that transitional time that he passed in San Francisco. And how was I in the week coming up? I am someone who is triggered by anniversaries and birthdays and all that crack. For anyone who's new to listening, I lost my grandmother. It'll be coming up to 3 years ago next month. And then I lost my daddy a year later. He died the next September. And then my granddad died just in a year ago in April there. I'm stuttering now. That's how you can tell when things are difficult. You start to lose your tongue. That's my crack if you're new to listening to this. And my friend slagged me, and my name's Carla McGreevy, and he was calling me Carla McGreevy. Grief has become a part of my identity these days. And again, for anyone who's new to me, I don't know what happened to me. There was just something that made me, well, obviously it was the aging of my grandparents. So my grandparents brought me up from I was 6. They looked after me and they were like my mum and dad. And I was very attached to them. Usually if children are separated from their biological parents, they will have attachment issues. Not that like most people have different degrees of attachment issues. When you've experienced loss at such a young age in your childhood, it can really affect how you experience loss when you're older. And especially for people like me, are people who were born in the 80s and 90s and the 70s and whatever decade you were born in, there wasn't a lot of support in the research that we now have around loss and the impact of that in childhood and how to support children through death. I think a lot of children were just left to get on with it and process it all in their own wee words, God love them, because the adults around them didn't have the education and the tools either. So I was in therapy and I was reading about healing, reading about trauma, and I sort of clicked on about this link about experience loss from a very young age and then experiencing loss again. And then I clicked on, you will definitely experience loss again, Carla. And I think we're all feel like this, don't we? We don't want anybody we love to die. And this thought became stronger and feeling became stronger. And I chose to do my 300-hour advanced yoga teacher training in sex, death, and wealth. Because yoga is a practice, a way of life for living and dealing with the huge suffering and heartbreak that can happen in your life and that will happen in your life. This is a really cheery Wednesday conversation, isn't it? And so in 2019, in the November, my grandparents, what age would my granny have been? She'd been about 87 and my granddad, say 81, 82. And you see your parents' age and your grandparents' age and you realise that life is for a definitive amount of time. And I decided to do this course and you couldn't have written, I've talked about it in another episodes, but I know some of you are brand new to me. So I'll try and make this quick, but still at the same time. I had decided to do this course in sex, death, and wealth so that I could prepare myself for experiencing death in life. And before I went to a white witch who only meets with women. And this lady called Angela, who was recommended to me by one of my customers, my client, I had to draw a tarot card, I think it was. And I think I left for Bali that year at around Halloween, and it was like a day before I was going. I was already going to study death. And I went to this woman, I drew tarot cards, and I drew 3 death cards. And she said, 3 people are going to die belonging to you, but it won't be for a few years yet. And she was right. My granny died in 2021. My daddy died in 2022. My granddad died in 2023. So all in the space of 18 months. Crazy the way the world works. And I went and studied death. So I'll share a wee bit about that. I've shared it in another episode that's earlier. I forget what episode it is. But in the other episode, I share with you how I prepared for death when I had warning. And that can be a good episode for you if you are loving and supporting someone who's terminally ill. But this episode today isn't about that. This episode is how we be with grief after someone has already left. The course that I did was more around preparing for death rather than the aftermath of death. And that's a big problem in our world, is that we pretend that we're going to live forever. And we don't talk about death. One of the factors due to the loss of faith and religion in our world, we don't have the same processes that used to exist in coping with death and honouring death. And, you know, in Ireland years ago, the whole village went to the wake and the funeral. And nowadays, people are struggling to attend, to find the time to attend people's wakes, to not someone you're close to, obviously, but, you know, I think it's important that people show up when the people you love lose the people they love, if that makes sense. And I think that tradition has somehow got lost along the way. And the difficulty around taking time off for funerals, and maybe it doesn't feel like a priority if you have yet to experience death. And I think that's something that really needs to come back in how we deal and process with grief. Due to the capitalist world we live in, they don't want us to grieve. They want us to keep producing, keep doing, and toxic positivity feeds into that too. People just want you to be okay and be okay fast. And it leads to a whole world of mental health problems and illnesses because the body needs to grieve and it needs time and space to do that. And there's a big cost to not grieving. I'll share with you Tara Brach's definition of grief. Tara Brach is a beautiful spiritual teacher and Buddhist teacher and psychologist. If you are interested in following her and her work, she's incredible. And she describes grief as work of the soul. It's healthy, cleansing, and intelligent. The process allows us to metabolize the pain of loss and continue to live. It lets us open to love. By honoring what has passed away, we are free to embrace the life that is here. And it's important, isn't it, that when we lose people, that it changes us, because love is so incredible in that way, and grief is love. And that's one of the quotes from Tara Brach that I hold close to my heart, is grief is eternal because so is love. And so many of you have shared stories of what it's like when your daddy's been past 10 years, when it's been 30 years and 40 years. And I can't imagine that. I can't imagine what it's like to have so much time passed from someone that you love so much and is such a big part of you for so long. And I also love how you can see in people's grief how close that loved one is to them. And I think that's really powerful and really special and important. And it helps me cope with grief, because that's a big fear that comes up, isn't it? When we lose someone we love, is that we're going to forget, that we're going to feel with, as time passes, that we grow further from them. We can be heartbroken that they don't know the things that are happening in our lives. Grief reminds us that they are right here with us. And that is a belief of mine, and it would be that of the spiritual path, that you have a relationship with whoever has passed. It's just in a different form now. And so last week, my crack with grief was Monday and Tuesday. I was really bad. I struggled to get out of bed. I had work to do on the Monday. Luckily, I had no clients, but I was meant to write things and I was meant to send emails and I was meant to do admin, and I struggled to get out of bed. It completely floored me. And this was 5 days before the anniversary, so sometimes the lead up to things can be harder than the event itself. And I mean, I slept a lot. I went to bed at 6 and I struggled to get out of bed the next day until like 10 o'clock. Like, that's an incredible amount of rest. And we can have all those thoughts, like, is there something wrong with me? And should I still be able to keep going? But this is a new experience for me in learning what grief is and how it shows up. And I think we can find great comfort in listening to other people's stories of grief and how it's met and how they live through it, because it's all different for different people. Some people avoid their grief for a long time and unravel 10 years later. Some people have no choice. They have little babies to look after, which helps them cope with the huge depth of grief. But there always comes a time when that falling apart happens. And that's definitely a big part of healing, is allowing yourself to unravel and fall apart and not be this robotic person who's constantly producing, doing, creating. It's just not real life. It's not real humanity, is it? And so, yes, so I fell apart on the Monday and Tuesday and it was horrendous. It felt like I'd just been dropped. I always say this, see, when it's grief around my daddy, and he brought up a lot of feelings of like having a shy boyfriend because I only met my daddy when I was 24, for anyone who's new to this, and our relationship was complicated. And I always felt like I wanted more from him. I always felt like I was seeking from him. And it was like a shy boyfriend that you were asking to behave in a different way. And that feeling comes up in grief of just being so in love with someone and them dropping you and you can't eat and you're just completely heartbroken. So that was the feeling I had. It was a real heaviness at the heart. I felt about 20 stone heavier. And it was interesting because on the Tuesday then, I did manage to go to bed and I worked and it was grand, but I couldn't physically move. Like, I think I did a short walk on Tuesday, but I had planned to go to yoga and all that crack, and I wasn't able to do any of those things. And I think I went to the gym on Wednesday. Yeah, it was Wednesday. And, I've been feeling really strong lately and good. And I've been able to do like 10 sit-ups, which is something I've been working on for a few years. And I can only do 5, and 5 felt like 10. And it reminded me of how tangible actually grief can be for an emotion that's invisible. Its effects can be, because you would have swore I'd put on 3 stone in a day. Like, that's how heavy I felt. And just sharing that for anyone else who is trying to make sense of how their body feels in grief. And then I actually got better towards the end of the week. Thursday was grand, and Friday I had a few drinks. Probably not the best thing to do in grief. Probably not. I definitely didn't plan it. My dad loved it as well, so it probably influenced that. So we'll get into this now, actually. So this is some shares around what we can do when we're meeting people who have passed anniversaries. Now I think number 1 is clear the day. Take the day off if you can, and just give yourself space to love and honor them. That is up for debate, right? Because some people, the pain is so much that they can't cope and they need the distraction of work. But I think it's gorgeous, if you can, is to clear the space and try and be with the pain and celebrate them and remember them in some way. And obviously that depends on how many years it's been, because I know a few of my friends did it for a number of years and then stopped. Like, they just continued to work and obviously marked the person in a different way. But I did work on the morning, by the way, on Friday. And then I sort of took a half day. So whatever degree you can clear the day, and especially in those first few years when grief can be so debilitating, I would definitely recommend that too. They say that you must take care of the things that they loved when they leave. So, for example, if the person who's died had a plant they loved, or a bench they loved, or a garden they loved, or a person they loved, even if you don't like them, then you attend to them, you take care of them for them. And I think that's really gorgeous. The example of my dad was that, he had a wife who he loved so dearly, and his mummy, who he really, really loves. So there are people that I can reach out to and remember Stephen with. And I hope that you have someone that you can reach out to remember them, their best mates, their favourite pub, whatever it can be. It can really help you feel close to them. And again, all these shares around grief can always be double-sided, because for some people it's too painful. But it's something to think about when you're ready as well. A third thing you can do is eat what they eat. I've really taken to this, especially my granny. My granny loved beige on beige, and I do not love beige on beige. And what I mean by beige on beige is peppered sauce, chicken goujons, garlic potatoes. That was, my granny loved that dinner. And I couldn't stop eating it after she died. And it wasn't something I would have thanked her for. Like, I would have ate it if it was like hungover and stuff, but I wouldn't have got the levels of pleasure that I get from it now, which is so funny. Whereas my dad was a boozy bitch, so I, like, it's easy for me to eat the things that he loved, but it's interesting me taking the things that I've never ate before. So I wonder if you've ever had that experience of craving things that you would never usually crave in the stages of grief. And that's something you can think about, like a meal that they loved, and you could cook it and remember them, and that can be really, really lovely. My granny loved a vodka and coke, and I just could not take a vodka and coke for all the love in the world. I love my granny, but there's just some drinks I just can't do. But I would buy someone else a vodka and coke, so maybe that's an option you can do. My dad loved a swall, and he loved all the same swall as me, so that was easy to have a wee margarita for him. And I think in the smells, though, maybe just pouring a vodka and coke would be, that is enough for me to feel close to my granny. And that's something you can do, make their teas, their coffees the way they wanted to. My granny loved bread with their butter. I mean, so much butter, and I would never be able to eat that. but just the ritual of making it as if I would have made it for her can really bring nostalgic feelings and just have that closeness and make them feel close to you. 4 is cry. Let the warm, salty tears flow. And for some people, that's really easy. And for people like me, I have been emotional, don't get me wrong, but I would more struggle to cry. And so I had arranged to go see Sing Sing, but I had to drink too many and didn't make. So, whoops. So that's a film you can go and see at the minute. I'm going to go see it this week and I'll keep you posted on it. Apparently, it's really emotional. So if you have a wee tear stuck in you, I really recommend Sing Sing. Tuesdays with Maury is a good book, heartbreaking book, but so life affirming. I would definitely read that. It's about an older man who's dying and a young journalist working with him. It's a gorgeous, really easy read. So there's songs that you can listen to, films you can watch, things to really wallow in it and help you cry, because I think I felt so heavy is because there's so many tears stuck inside. So when you have that heaviness and you feel depressed and you're struggling to move, for me, a cry really helps that. And it's for you to work out what could help you or what that heaviness needs. And sometimes you just put your hands on your body and ask it what it needs. And I think a lot of us hold shame around crying from our communities and our upbringings and all those things. But one of my favorite quotes is, "There is sacredness in tears. They are not a mark of weakness, but of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are the messengers of overwhelming grief and of unspeakable love." I know, it's so gorgeous. And in shamanism, they talk about the warm, salty tears asking you to go to the ocean, to go back to water, to be comforted and nurtured. Which takes me to a next part, which is go to the ocean. Water is great for grief. It connects us to something bigger in which everything can be held. So it doesn't take it away, doesn't rub it away or make it dissolve. But when you're in something bigger, there's a bigger container for what it can be held. I think that's the reason we can feel so tense, is because there's something so big inside of us and we feel so small, and then it's really overwhelming. And that's why going to the mountains, which in shamanism connects us to father energy, and the ocean connects us to mother. And despite the gender of whoever's passed and whether they held more masculine and feminine energy, both is great. For me, I always go to the water because I feel feminine energy, water is so needed for such powerful emotions. It needs the feminine and needs nurtured. But walking is really great for grief too, because it's slow and steady. It can really regulate you. It can really calm the system. And long walks can really help. Although I'm a brat, so I'd be like, this is boring, this is too slow. We're all different in how we meet it, right? But even I notice when I go for a big walk, I'm mentally raging about it, but my body and my bodiness loves it, and I'm less of a dickhead after a walk, if that makes sense. Another thing to be mindful of is to safeguard yourself. In grief, what I've realized myself is we can self-harm. We can get into unhealthy relationships. We can take up a whole range of behaviours in which help us cope with pain, but really aren't great for us. And it's to have compassion for that. That's normal. So whether that's you're drinking more, you've taken up smoking, vaping, you're sleeping with an ex, whatever it may be, it's just noticing your body is trying to cope. You're trying to cope. And if that's the case, you may need to safeguard yourself, which means having distraction, taking yourself away, putting your phone away, blocking numbers, whatever you need to do, because sometimes we can feel worse after. I mean, I was someone who drank and shouldn't have drank, and I was actually all right the next day. It wasn't too bad, but in the past I've drank and I've really felt even lower the next day. So it's to be mindful that drink is a downer, and I wouldn't recommend it in grief, but I'd hold my hands up. I drank on Friday and I shouldn't have. Another way we can remember someone is through music, whatever music they liked. My dad didn't really like music. He was such a fucking weirdo. He didn't like the cinema either. But that's something that a lot of people find a lot of comfort in, is listening or creating a playlist that helps you remember that person. Is a really gorgeous thing to do. Or to ask the people that you love, do you remember what song reminds you of my mom, or my dad, or my sister, my brother, or my friend, or whoever it may be. Another thing, because I've lost my count, is do the things that they like to do. For example, my dad loved to swallow and bringing strays home. I didn't do that line, but I did have a drink and I went to a restaurant on my own, which was my dad's number one habit. He loved to lunch on his own and he loved sitting at the bar. I hate sitting at the bar because there's no back to the stool. So you can think about all the things that the person that they love to do, whether they love that, they love eating at home, did they love a big group dinner, whatever it may be. The cinema, yoga, the gym. My dad absolutely hated the gym, but he liked looking sweet. So all those things, if I had been in Belfast, I definitely would have loved to catch the sunrise. Sunrise, it's the start of a new beginning. It's like a beacon of hope. Where sunset, I think, would have depressed me around grief, but your relationship to sunrises and sunsets is going to be different. And maybe, the person that has passed had a different relationship with them. My dad probably wouldn't even notice the sunrise or sunset, but those transitional times of the day when darkness turns to light, light turns to darkness, can offer so much in my experience, and you can experience the effects that it has on you. I'm on number 9, but yeah, I really shouldn't give numbers when I haven't counted, is talk to them. If you're really struggling, ask them for help. I often ask them to visit me in my dreams. My dad never visits me in my dreams and I'm absolutely raging with him. And it's so gorgeous. This morning when I went to teach, there was a wee feather on my mat. So, you can take all the messages, so you can be cynical about it. I'm going to say it was a feather from my dad. But yeah, talk to them, ask them maybe to visit you in your dreams. And with one nice dreams, a common thing that people experience after grief is nightmares where they are reliving how the person died, or there can be really dark dreams, where it's linked to the coffin and the body being passed and things like that. And obviously that is extremely difficult. And I would definitely look at how you can process some of that energy that's coming up in your dreams in the conscious state in your daytime. However, in this case, I'm talking about dreams where they're talking to you and it's gorgeous. My granny didn't visit me after 18 months and my granddad a year. And oh my God, see, since June. So my granddad's anniversary was the 27th of April. I dream of them every night, every single night. But sometimes, and I know a lot of you have shared the same, is when it's dreams where they're there and everything's so real and normal, it can be so painful when you wake up and remember that they're gone. But for me, it's worth it for those brief moments in dream state where you're with them again. Talk to people about how you're feeling. Don't try to process grief alone. I would definitely recommend being in company, being around people. Being around other heartbeats will help your heartbeat. We have a tendency in this world to try and lick our wounds on our own, and it just contributes to more feelings of loneliness, feeling isolated, feeling like no one understands. Allow yourself to be seen in all your vulnerability. I think that's why we hide in grief or hide when we're struggling, because of this conditioning that we're always meant to be positive and grateful for our lives and all that crap. Allow people to see you fall apart, because that gives them permission for them to be allowed to be seen when they're falling apart. And we heal in community. And don't underestimate the power of allowing yourself to be seen when things are really hard. It's really powerful. The last thing I'm going to share is a weird one, because when I feel grief and I was telling you about Monday where I couldn't get out of bed and I was fucking raging. I suppose I was scared too. I was like, is this going to last forever? Because that first year after my dad died, and it was like the second year of my granny dying, and then my grandpa and stuff, I really struggled. Like, struggled to get out of bed. I shared this with you. Struggled to write emails. And I just want to be really honest for anyone who is in that deep depression that I've been there too. So I know how scary it can be when you're like, am I going to get pulled under again and not be able to get up? But at the same time, now that I'm more resourced and coping better, I feel grateful for the grace. I try and remember that on the days when you can't get out of bed and you can't stop crying, wouldn't it be awful if you never felt that? When you didn't let love move you and life move you and have that? Because if someone died and you just got on your whole life just being happy all the time and never fell apart, like say if I died and I was with someone and they didn't fall apart, I'd be fucking raging, do you know what I mean? So, and I know that like if you think about it on the reverse, whoever you're grieving, they would absolutely fall apart if you died. And it's just rightly so, that massive love that you had, that huge person who gave you so much in your life, who you're so grateful for, who's so defining of who you are and everything that you do and how you want to live your life and the person you want to be. They were such a huge part of all that. It's only right that you break your heart for a whole day, that you struggle to get out of bed, that you fall apart. But again, that's another double-edged sword where you can be grateful for it and also be afraid of it. I think that's it. I'll go to some shares that you shared with me on Instagram. There's a friend of mine who lost her parents when she was very young. So she was an orphan from she was like 21. And that's, like, I can't even imagine that. That's incredible loss, incredible trauma, incredible grief in which she lives through her life. And she says that the first 3 years, what was her words? A minimum of 3 years before you even feel okay, sending you lots of love. And I thought that sounds about right. And another person shared, find a picture then and visit the place or go somewhere new. You think that they'll like, that's such a nice one. Bring them to where they never got to go. Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah, perhaps they talked about doing something they never got to do it for them. Write them letters, talk to them, pray to them, honour them, have a ritual for them. It's so important and something that's so lost in our world and that massively needs to change. I hope this helps whoever is navigating the world of grief, and if you haven't experienced loss yet, it can help you support your friends who are moving through it too. That's everything from me today, I think. I hope you have a lovely Wednesday or whatever day you're listening to this on. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you come back to listen next week, and I will see you guys.